Hello and welcome to this week's Sunday sit-down video. I'm Jamey. I run a company called Stillmeyer Games, and that will be important in a second. And this week, I'm going to be talking about my favorite games, my top 10 favorite games of 2018. There are a bunch of honorable mentions on this list. Some of them are games that came out in 2017 that I didn't play for the first time until 2018. Others are just great games that came out in 2018 that didn't quite make my top 10 list, but maybe I respect or I enjoy or I think are particularly innovative. I will mention all of those in the description below. I'm not going to go into them in the video because I'm sure you just want to hear the top 10. I do want to mention that because I run a company called Stillmeyer Games, the games that we publish are not eligible for this list. And this year we published two new games. We published My Little Scythe and Between Two Castles of Madkin Ludwig. I guess this was the year of crossovers for Stillmeyer Games. I wouldn't have published those games if I don't absolutely love them. I'm glad to get them to the table whenever anyone wants to play them, but they are not eligible for this list because I'm a little biased. So let's jump into the list. And I should mention that the bottom 5 games on this list are games that technically released in 2017, but the vast majority of people didn't play them until 2018. At least that's my perception, and I definitely didn't play them until 2018 either. There are a lot of games that come out near the end of the year, like Essen releases, and games that come out in November, December that I think are tough to make lists for that year. So these are games that I played. Some of them are for the first time in January of last year, so they were really close. But I intentionally put them in the bottom 5 because I did want my top 5 to actually be games that were released in 2018. So my number 10 is Rajas of the Ganges. I love this game. This is a worker placement game that also has dice that are used for resources. Or the resources are the dice themselves. And it just has a bunch of mechanisms that feel really good when they come together. There's a nice little engine building aspect to it. The dice management and how you can manipulate the dice and where you place the dice and when you place the dice that you choose. It just feels really good throughout the game. It can be a little tight if you do run out of dice. So when I teach it, I try to remind people that dice are your resources. If you run out, you don't have resources to spend. And my favorite thing about the game is the crossing tracks. The game end is triggered when these two tracks cross. So you have a money track and you have a fame track, and they go in opposite directions around the board. So as you're gaining money, you're going counterclockwise, and as you're gaining fame, you're moving clockwise. You gain little bonuses around those tracks, so there's a reason to move forward on both of them. But to win the game, you need those two to intersect. So you might really focus on fame and not so much on money. Or you might focus a lot on money and not so much on fame, or you might balance the two. There's a lot of interesting choices there. I don't think I've seen that in any other game ever, and I really, really love how it works in Rajas of the Ganges. That's my number 10. My number 9 is Azul. I don't own Azul. A friend owns it. Azul now, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a very, very popular abstract engine building game actually, I didn't quite get it at first. The first play, I didn't get it. But then upon repeat plays, I found I really, really loved it. And I love all the different strategies that go into where you place the tokens on the board. And I really like the way the drafting works, and that you are drafting tiles of a specific color, all tiles of the same color, from different pools. And the tiles that you don't choose get pushed into the middle to form a new pool. That's just a really clever drafting mechanism that I'd love to see in other games. Yeah, Azul, that's number 9. That's one that probably could go on a 2017 list. I'm sure plenty of people played it in 2017. But for me, and I think quite a few people, 2018 was the year that they played Azul for the first time. My next game is another one that I don't own, and that is Dice Forge. This is a game that we discovered at Geekway to the West last year, and it was one that, again, technically came out in 2017, but we've had a lot of fun with it in 2018. This is one where you are actually building dice throughout the game. You start the game with basic dice with these little plastic sides that pop off, and you can replace them with new sides of the dice. So you're engine building as you play. You'll hear that term a lot, engine building. I love engine building. You're engine building as you play because you are improving your dice as you play. But you're also gaining these cards. You're spending resources to gain these cards that also can give you either points or ongoing abilities. And the mix of those two engine building elements is really, really cool. But the dice is really where it's at. It's such a clever component. And it feels really good to modify your dice. And also, actually, I should mention this. You get to roll your dice a lot, which I think is really, really crucial. You roll your dice on every player's turn. You only get to actually buy stuff when it's your turn, but you roll them on every turn and you move up some different resource tracks on your player mat. I think that's brilliant that you actually get to use these dice quite a bit that you're building. That is Dice Forge, my number 8 favorite game of 2018. My number 7 game is Fantasy Realms. This is a little filler, combo-driven game, card game for, I believe, 2 to 6 players. Maybe it can even go up to 7. We often play it with 5 or 6 because it plays so well. And it is all about the combos. You have these, you're basically building a hand of cards. You start with a hand of 7 cards, and at the end of the game, you're going to put your entire hand of 7 cards on the table and get as many points as possible as you can from those cards. Some of the cards want to be in your hand with other cards, and other cards don't want to be in the hand with other cards. So you're trying to manage that throughout the game through selecting from a common pool. And every turn, you're always drawing a card, and you're all either from the common pool or the deck, and you're always putting a card down. So at the end of every turn, you end up with 7 cards again. But it's really the combos that make this game shine. There are just outlandish combos in this game. There are cards that say that they're worth 100 points if you manage to get these other different requirements, these other different cards in your hand. And that's a lot. A typical endgame score in this game is around 200. So it feels good to just get all these points from these cards. That's Fantasy Realms. I've had a blast with this game, and I know I will continue to get this to the table quite a bit in 2019 and beyond. That's Fantasy Realms. That was my number 7. My number 6 is Downforce from Restoration Games. This game is so much fun. It's a racing game where you control a car. So unlike some of these other racing games I've talked about recently, you do have your own car that you are controlling, but your fate isn't entirely in your hands, and your prospect of winning isn't entirely up to you. It isn't entirely on your car, because you can bet on other cards as you play as well. And the player interaction in this game is superb, because whenever you play a card, on your turn, that's all you're doing. You're playing one card, and you have to move all of the cars that are noted on that card. So if I have a card that says orange 7, green 3, and then blue 1, I must move those cars in that order if possible. There might be other cars blocking them. So if I'm the green player, I might try to play that card at a time that the orange car cannot move very far. But I love that when it's not your turn, you still feel so involved and invested in what's happening around the table, because other players are moving your car. And on your turn, you have to think very strategically about which cars you're going to help, which cars you're going to avoid helping based on which card you're going to play. It's so easy to teach and play, and I've had a blast with this game. This might be my most played game of this year, I think, actually, with the exception of my number 1 game. But that's Downforce from Restoration Games. A really, really wonderful game, and beautifully expandable through new tracks and new card abilities. So I already have 1 expansion in here, and I look forward to getting other ones as well. That is Downforce, my number 6. So we're into the top 5 now. These are the games that actually were released in 2018. And the order might have been a little different if I had done this differently, but I felt it was fair to only consider truly games released in 2018 for my top 5. My number 5 is the newest one on the list, and that is Gingerbread House. I just talked about this on the video the other day. It looks light and unassuming, but don't be... that's a little trick, because it's actually a fairly... It's a game with a lot of interesting decisions, basically. It's a tile placement game where you are building a gingerbread house, many, many layers of a gingerbread house, and you are trying to trap fantasy creatures inside your gingerbread house. And there are lots of different things pulling players in different directions in this game. You're trying to fill up entire floors of your house, because you get bonuses when you do that. You are trying to pair together similar icons. You can see these icons on here. So you're trying to pair up 2 together so that when you put a tile over the 2 of them, you get a bonus token of that type. And at the same time, you are trying to lure in these fantasy creatures, and you're trying to decide, do you go after the fantasy creatures that are worth more points but take a little longer to actually obtain, versus ones that are worth fewer points but you can bring in faster. When you bring them in, you get a bonus tile that you get to place immediately in your gingerbread house. So just a lot of different decisions pulling you in different directions in this game. I played with the simple version and the complex version. The simple version just has points whenever you finish a floor. The complex version has more complicated bonus cards that you get that can steer your strategy a little bit. But I've just had a lot of fun playing this and teaching it so far, and I know I'll continue to get to the table even after Gingerbread season is over. That's Gingerbread's House from Phil Walker Hardy. That's my number 5. My number 4 is The Mind. I didn't know what to think of this game when it first came out, when I first heard about it, but it sounded so intriguing, and I trust the folks at Pandasaurus Games. I'm actually somewhat related to them through my brother. Married the sister of of one of the people, Molly, who runs Pandasaurus Games. But I decided to get it, and I've really, really enjoyed it. It doesn't feel like any other game that I've played. It's a cooperative game where you're trying to basically just play numbers in order, but you can't communicate with the other players. So it's all about kind of syncing up and finding the right timing with these other players as to how and when you play the cards. And there are moments in this game, you may have heard this if you watch reviews but haven't played it, but there are moments in this game where you sync up so beautifully. And the last game that we played, it starts off so slow because you just play one card in the first round, then you play 2 in the second round. And by the last round in the game that we were playing, I think we were playing up to maybe 7 cards. There was just a flurry of cards, just one after another, because we were trying to get all the cards in the right order. And it synced up perfectly. We had no lives left, and it was just for such a simple abstract game, it was such a memorable moment. People were sitting around cheering for us as we were playing at the end of our game night. So yeah, I had to put the game on this. I really enjoy it, and I can't wait to play more of it. That's The Mind. That's my number 4. My number 3 is, Welcome to. This is one of my other most played games of the year. I have really, really enjoyed this. I heard about it earlier this summer, and I got one of the pre-ordered copies, not on the Kickstarter, but directly from the company. And this is a game. It's a kind of a roll and write game, but you're not really rolling. You're drawing cards, and you're marking off these different areas in your little suburb. And it's essentially a track building game. You're moving up these tracks essentially as you're filling in the different houses in your suburb. But the thing I really love about this game is that it opened my eyes to what roll and write games can be, and that is that they can scale up to any number of players if you design it correctly. So in Welcome to, you splay out these 3 cards on the table, actually 6 cards total. Some are on the back, 3 are on the front, 3 are on the back, and you just select one. But when you select that, you're not removing it from other players to select that as well. It's a simultaneous choice that all players are making at the same time. And that means the only limit for player count is really table size and the number of sheets of paper you have and the number of pencils that you have, because anyone can play simultaneously with everyone else at the table as you're playing this way. And so it really opened up my eyes to potentially maybe even publishing a roll and write game someday, because that just seems like a beautiful thing that at any time, any number of people can play this game at a game night. And that's what we did. Like for the first few weeks that we were playing it a ton, we would sit down with 6 players, and then someone else would show up for game night. And so we would say, just jump right in, fill out a random house that you missed. And then someone else might show up. So people were like just joining the game as we played. That's really, really rare for a game to be able to do that. That's Welcome to, my number 3. My number 2 might be the most innovative game of the year, and that is KeyForge. Just the idea of a uniquely printed and pre-constructed deck that is unique all around the world. This is the only copy of the game of this deck. This is F. Falconson, the Prison Copper Sentinel. This is my favorite deck. It's just a mind-blowing concept to me as a designer and a publisher. I'm amazed at what Fantasy Flight has done with this game. And as I kind of predicted here, the sense of ownership over having your own unique deck and knowing that deck more than anybody else in the world just feels really, really good. Also, it helps that I've actually really enjoyed playing the game. I can't stop thinking about it. I just want to play more and more of it. The game, it gives you plenty of interesting decisions. It lets you feel really powerful at times. And when you're not feeling really powerful, you're filling your hands with cards to be more powerful later, or filling your tableau with cards. I love the idea that there are no costs to play the cards in this game. All you were doing is deciding one of the 3 factions, and you're doing all the stuff that turn with those 3 factions. You're playing cards, you're activating cards, you're discarding cards of that faction. That is such a brilliant mechanism, I really, really love it. This is KeyForge, my number 2 game of 2018. My number 1 game breaks a rule that I generally use for these lists, which is I try to pick games that fit the requirement of games that I am really excited to play again right now. I don't really want to play this game again. I played it through, but I loved my plays of it. I truly loved it. It was the game that I played the most in 2018. I had the best experience with it. I'll just show it to you so you know what I'm talking about. It's The Rise of Queensdale. As you probably know, I like legacy games. I love legacy games, especially since I designed Charterstone, a village building legacy game. So I didn't know what to think about Queensdale when I heard that it is also a village building legacy game. But it's so different from Charterstone. Like the 2 games play very, very differently. And I love both of them. I think they both stand side by side. If you love Charterstone, I would recommend you try Queensdale. If you love Queensdale, I would highly recommend that you try Charterstone. But just the stuff in this game, I can't spoil it. I guess the back shows non-spoiler stuff. It shows what your village starts out as. But we had so much fun with it. There's so many interesting, innovative mechanisms in this game. They're little mini games that are a ton of fun to play. It does what I love in legacy games, which is it lets you do things early in the game that you wonder about what the impact will be much later in the game. It does that really, really well. And it does something that I think is very, very difficult with a legacy game, which is that it creates variability within each game, aside from the legacy stuff, to make each game fun and interesting. I've heard some reviewers say that differently, but I actually really enjoyed the core mechanisms of deciding how I'm going to get points this game. Am I going to build stuff? Am I going to go around and gather resources? Am I going to use my dice? Your dice are workers in the game. Are you going to use them optimally to jump in and get the more valuable action spots? The core mechanisms are really, really solid, and that creates a great platform for all the legacy stuff to really shine in The Rise of Queensdale. I love this game. It's my number 1 game of 2018. It's one that I probably won't play again. I think it is replayable after you play through the campaign, but I got the experience that I wanted out of this game, and I'm so thankful that Inca and Marcus Brand designed it, because I just had a blast with it. That's my number 1 game of 2018, The Rise of Queensdale. As I mentioned, there are a ton of games. You might be surprised. Your favorite game may not be on this list, and I totally respect that you have different preferences than I do. Your game might be listed below in other games that I played for the first time in 2018 and respect and admire, but just didn't put into my top 10 list. And I look forward to hearing your list in the comments. If you want to share your top 10 games or your top games, maybe you haven't come up with a top 10 list yet, but if you just have a list of games that you loved that you played for the first time in 2018, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. So that's my 2018 list. That's it. Thank you so much for joining me for this list, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts below. Take care.